listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you're listening to the Straight to Video podcast. I'm bringing things back home again on today's episode as I speak to Derby's very own Dominic Burns. This was the first time I've had a chance to sit down and have a proper chat with Dominic after watching his career in the movie industry rise and rise over the past 10 years or so. He really is a movie multitasker, not just as a movie director, but also writer, producer and actor, continually spinning plates and taking on numerous roles in each of his projects. I first became aware of Dominic's work when he worked on the single-shot horror movie Cut back in 2010, and had seen him at several movie nights at Derby's wonderful Quad Cinema. His IMDb and overall movie resume is incredibly impressive. Since Cut, which he worked alongside Gremlin's Zach Galligan, he's worked with the likes of Mark Hamill of Star Wars Luke Skywalker fame, and even Jean-Claude Van Damme, but most recently he's become a close working partner with Jason Mewes, who many of you may know as the partner in crime of writer-director Kevin Smith and the entire View Askew universe. Dominic and Jason struck up a friendship on their movie Devil's Tower, which brought Jay all the way from America to the streets of Derby, and since then they developed the film Madness in the Method, which got its release last year. I could attempt to list the number of amazing stars and celebrity cameos in that film, but I'm pretty sure I'd miss a bunch, so check it out and see how many you can spot. It's a super fun film. Being from the Derby area, it's so great to see someone like Dominic break out and really grab the opportunities put in front of them, and it was fun to be able to sit down and talk to him all about it, and also how it led to becoming one of the producers on the recent Jay and Silent Bob reboot. We cover a lot of movie talk in this chat, starting right back from his early love of cinema, working on the classic TV show TFI Friday, breaking into the film industry before finally working with some of his all-time heroes. He shares some really amazing and fun stories which I think you're going to love, and gives us a real insight into how the independent movie business works. As we know, it's pretty tough to get to the cinema right now, so hopefully this chat might just scratch that itch a little, so grab your popcorn and sit back as we go to the movies with Derby's very own Dominic Burns. How's it going?
Hello, mate. How you doing? You all right?
Not so bad, not so bad. So you grew up, obviously, during the 80s and 90s in Derby. What was the first film that really had a massive impact on you?
I can't remember, and there's some debate, whether the first film I saw at the cinema was either Santa Claus the movie with John Lithgow and Dudley Moore, or He-Man Master of the Universe with Dolph Lundgren. For people who know Derby, this is kind of boring for people who don't, but the nightclub, it's a fast food place now. You know where Zanzibar used to be? I don't know how well you know Derby, but...
Is it like the Cosmo place or something, was that?
Yeah, it's like, I've not been in it, but it's like a big food place. But that used to be a cinema, a cool cinema as well. And that was where I saw He-Man. I remember my dad taking me. And so those two films obviously had such a huge impact on me because, you know, I can remember like the excitement of sitting in the cinema and just the whole thing just blew my mind. And it's kind of, I guess this is kind of pathetic to admit. So when they opened the UCI, which was like my heaven, the cinema with every single Thursday, the Derby Evening Telegraph would put out the cinema lineup for the next week, and I would cut it out and pin it on my wall so I'd know. But of course, there's probably one film a week I could see if I was lucky. I remember seeing Pret-a-Porter like 3 times at the cinema. I don't know if you remember that film, but it's not worthy of 3. It's a fun film, but I would just see anything I could, right? Because obviously they didn't have 12A back then. And so the UCI just was my absolute, I just loved it. Loved nothing more than going to the cinema.
Can you remember the little movie shop they used to have at the UCI?
Oh, yeah, totally. I remember the Pizza Hut. I remember the movie. I remember the arcade games, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then they had the Simpsons there for a while. Believe me, I remember every iteration of that cinema. Anyway, during lockdown, I had a bit of a ridiculous idea, but I found online the little intros that the UCI used to play before the films, and had a couple of film nights with my really uninterested, much younger than I am girlfriend, who just didn't get it at all. But I would play the little UCI intros before a film that I remember seeing in the UCI with a couple of beers during lockdown on a Saturday night, just to try and take myself out of the madness. The memories are so happy for me.
Because you're straight back there, aren't you, when something like that happens?
God, yeah.
I mean, like something like the Pearl and Dean music is just iconic for doing that straight away. Everybody is initially transported back. It's just the best feeling.
I mean, those old UCI graphics, they were great. They were so... I mean, for anyone who knows Derby, it's now the Odeon Cinema. It used to be the UCI, but... And they used to do they used to make like real effort. And I know this is going to sound like, old man kind of bullshit. Can I swear on this, by the way? I'm not sure.
You can swear as much as you want.
I don't want to sound like an old man spinning his bullshit. But like I remember during the Jurassic Park promotion, they had briefly in the UCI car park, they had the world's biggest popcorn thing. It was massive. It was like, story and a half high. I don't know, 8 foot high or something. And full of popcorn. It had the world record as the biggest like thing of popcorn in the whole of the world, in the UCI car park in Derby. And then you'd walk in and everyone would be queuing along the walls to see Jurassic Park. And they had all the floors, they'd put stickers on the floors of the dinosaur prints. And I remember when Addams Family premiered, you walked into the UCI and they'd done up the whole lobby as the Addams Family's front room. And they had actors playing members of the Addams Family just sitting around in this room. So as you were queuing along either side of you would queue for the 2 big screens were on the right and left of the whole complex. So you would queue against the right and left wall. So as you were queuing, you got to just look at the lobby and watch the Addams Family interacting. They played the Addams Family music. The actors got up, did this weird kind of routine-y dance thing. And then the actors became the ushers, and then they would go and guide you to your seat. And I was like, I've not seen anything even close to that in many. Adam Marsh at the Quad, which is the independent cinema in Derby. He does stuff like that, and he's very, very brilliant at coming up with ideas like that. But very rare you see that kind of attention to detail, never mind passion associated with cinema nowadays.
And that's making memories straight away. There's probably like no budget for that. I mean, you see it at the big premieres. You'll see like at the Star Wars premieres, you have all the stormtroopers walking people in and all that kind of stuff. But it's so cool if they can do it on a smaller level in just like little towns. And I remember when you used to buy the movie this is me showing my age now. I've still got like a Dark Crystal movie program, stuff like that from when that movie was shown. It's nuts. And that's stuff that logs in your brain. It really does.
Well, yeah, because I think that, and again, I think there's loads of awesome things going on in film now. And I think that streaming, brings loads of amazing opportunities, and it's great to have that level of access to all movies. But equally, the downside of it is I think the tangible perceived worth of a film has really changed. Because me and my mates, when we were kids, we'd have stand-up boxing matches in the middle of Blockbuster because, there was 6, 7 of us and we had to choose 2, maybe 3 movies, on a Friday or a Saturday night. And those movies you chose, you were watching them. If 10 minutes in you hated it, now you would give absolute shit to the person whose choice it was if it wasn't brilliant, absolutely. But you would never turn it off. You would watch it because what else are you going to do? That's what you've chosen. You've committed. Whereas now you don't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything. You watch a film on Netflix and you flick it off in 5 minutes if you're bored. And so it's just a film just isn't it's just not the perception of a film just isn't worth what it used to be worth, right? And I think that what cinemas are now going to have to do, and 3D is not, in my humble opinion, the answer, is they're going to have to, increasingly make the cinematic experience different from the home entertainment experience. And there's always going to be a desire, particularly a pandemic like this has shown us that there's always going to be a desire, in my opinion, for people to get together and watch something. There's no feeling like watching a terrifying movie in a sold-out cinema or a hilarious comedy in a sold-out cinema. There's no atmosphere like it. So there'll always be that desire. But I think moving forward, if we think a bit more about making the entire cinematic experience a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, throwing in those touches, and I totally agree with you, there's not the budget to do it, but I feel like there may become the budget to do it if people start doing it because it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Because I feel like that might attract more people to the cinema.
Definitely.
More attractive, a bit more fun, a bit of a night out. You got to kind of turn the cinema into a little bit more like the theatre experience in a sense, because fewer films are going to go to the cinema, more films are going to go straight to home entertainment. And so you want to, it's so important that the cinema's got to survive, and at the moment, there's cinemas are in trouble. They're struggling.
How have you found the cinema experience? You've obviously seen a few films in the States as well. How have you found the cinema experience from an audience point of view? Because I know it's American audiences seem to go for it a bit more, and it almost becomes not like a concert, but I remember going to see one of the Halloween films in the States and people were proper screaming and going for it. I was like, holy shit, this is like something from a film. Have you witnessed any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, yeah, one of my favorite things to do whenever I'm in a new city is go and check out the cinemas. I mean, it's ridiculous. And one of my favorite cinemas in the world is in Los Angeles. They've got ArcLight in Hollywood. They've got Tarantino's got his own cinema in Hollywood, which is it's so good. It's oh god, I could move in there. But Los Angeles is a bit different because it's so difficult, because I get asked a lot, what's America like? And I know it sounds a bit annoying, but I can't really answer that question. I can tell you what Los Angeles is like. I'm not even sure I can tell you what California is like. I was in New Orleans for a couple of months last year shooting a movie, so I could probably give you a good idea of what New Orleans is like. But it's really like an American asking us what Europe's like, because you can tell them what England's like, but England is not necessarily anything like Spain. So all I can tell you is what Los Angeles is like, and I have no idea what other American states are like. Well, I've been to the cinema in a few of the states, but the one I've been to the most by far is LA. And LA is, of course, absolutely ram-packed with film fans. So what's super dope about LA is that you come out of, particularly a cinema like the ArcLight, which really does attract film fans. And it can be like, I'm a bit of a night owl. So the ArcLight might start a film at 11:30 midnight on a Tuesday night. And you can be pretty sure that everyone else in there is a fairly big film fan as well. And they're usually writers or filmmakers, so it's not unusual at all after the film, especially in a cinema like the ArcLight or in Tarantino's cinema, that people will just get chatting about the film. I've never really experienced that before in Derby or even London. It's like, so it's not uncommon at all to kind of, to just randomly as you're walking out the cinema, just engage in conversation with people about what they thought and, but in terms of the actual audience reaction, I would say they probably are a bit more vocal. They're more likely to scream at the, yell at the screen but equally there is, in the places I frequent, there is, the screens are usually introduced. People are specifically asked to turn their phone off and not talk. And, so there's also, I don't find it in a disrespectful way. I find it in a really fun way. And, I can't stand somebody fucking talking in the cinema. It just boils my blood. But at the same time, if someone's like yelling at the screen or having fun with the movie, then that's different. Everyone, is just engaging. It's just having fun. Yeah, but American audiences are a riot. Great fun.
I think the only experience I've had of that in the UK is I vividly remember going to see Rocky IV at our local cinema. And it was the first Rocky film I'd ever seen. I just went in cold at part 4. It was a Saturday matinee.
Amazing.
And people were proper like cheering during the fight at the end. I can remember that vividly. I don't know, because it was like a Saturday afternoon full of 12-year-old kids. It might have been that. I'm not sure. But they were proper like cheering towards the end of it.
Well, you do get it a little bit. I find it, I often go to the, when a film comes out at 12:01, and it's the new Avengers or, whatever it is. And I find that you do get a little bit of that over here in those big premieres for the films that people are absolutely gagging to see. One of my, I'm so gutted that, Bill and Ted 3, that would have been such a great cinematic experience, and in fact a lot of the crew that worked on Jay and Bob in New Orleans went on to shoot Bill and Ted 3. They shot that in New Orleans as well, and I think that would have been a really good, I feel like the opening weekend of Bill and Ted in normal times would have been packed full of people that were super excited and super buzzing that they'd made it, and I feel like that would have been a really great atmosphere. And it's kind of heartbreaking that we didn't get that. But also, the classic sort of friendly audiences do tend to be premieres, not necessarily at film festivals. If you have a premiere at Cannes, generally the audience are fairly warm, but, they can be prickly. It tends to be more the press screenings that are more prickly. But, when everyone's in a tuxedo and they've had a glass of wine and they're in a big premiere, everyone's in a good mood anyway, and there's kind of a will to love the film. But film festivals aren't a guarantee, whereas I think for a lot of the premieres of my films or premieres that I've been to, they tend to be a lot of fun because everybody's there. Everybody, most people in a room like that have some connection to somebody who's made it. They have some understanding of what they've been through for that film to have made it to the big screen. And there's just a will to, no matter what the critics have said or the box office performance is likely to be, it's just that one night, you get it. Everyone's there supporting it. Everyone gets to see themselves or see their work on the screen. And it tends to be a really unique and incredible atmosphere.
I love that. So was there a movie you regularly loved and watched or rented from Blockbuster? A go-to film, which can't find anything, let's go for the old faithful. Was there one which you watched a lot, and when you bring it up in conversation, people were like, I've never heard of that film before?
We're not doing an all-night podcast here because believe me, one of my favorite things in the world to do is to figure out one of my friends' taste in films and then suggest a film that they haven't seen, but that I'm pretty sure they'll like based on their taste. So there's so many. There's so many, and it depends how obscure you go, I guess. I mean, I tell you a really good, because I tended to, two things I did when I was a teenager is one of them, I had a mate of mine who was a bit older than me who worked at the video shop. So I would go and hang out with him in the video shop, and it was like a private one, and then I would just work my way through the weekly rentals. For anyone who doesn't know, you would get like, as I know you'll get the brand new rentals that you get for like 1, maybe 2 nights, and often you'd have to reserve them because there'd only be 2 copies or 3 copies, especially in the smaller video shops. And then you get like a weekly selection, which would be loads of older movies that you could rent for a week, and they'd be cheaper. And so I just worked my way through the weekly section. I didn't really almost care. I just wanted to educate myself. I wanted to watch as much as I could. I had a good idea that I wanted to go into acting or making movies, or, so I just watched anything really. And then because I'm a bit of an insomniac, like there's nothing better than flicking on BBC One randomly, and suddenly there'll be some random film starting at midnight, and you'll be like, oh, perfect, I'll sit and watch it.
I'm going to watch Predator again, even though I've got it on DVD.
Well, yeah, totally, absolutely. But I'm talking about, further back when I first got a TV in my room, and I was first, I don't know, wouldn't matter what was. I remember seeing Duel, the Spielberg movie, the evil truck movie.
That is a great one, which always seems to come on at like 12:30.
Totally. Scared the shit out of me. I mean, I was far too young to see that. Proper scared me. It was great. I loved it. A recent one I've recommended to a couple of people that no one seems to have seen is a movie called Let It Ride with Richard Dreyfuss.
I've not seen that one.
Worth looking up. It's a brilliant, fun movie. Jennifer Tilly's in it, Richard Dreyfuss. It's really, really fun. It's really good fun. In terms of, I'm a big fan of the great outdoors. I love John Candy, love Dan Aykroyd, love Bill Murray. I tend, I guess, like, the classics and the obvious ones, Lethal Weapons and Die Hards and, the Back to the Futures and all the 80s greats. I just watch them over and over again. Perhaps one that isn't as common is The Burbs. I love The Burbs. That gets watched at least once a year. I'm kind of looking at I've got a load of shelves in front of me, and I'm just looking at my ridiculous DVD collection, which is just which is just, to be honest with you, in the days of streaming now, I almost feel like DVDs are even more relevant, or Blu-rays are even more relevant, because there's 15 different streaming channels that the movie you want to watch could be on, and you got to subscribe to this channel or buy that, or drives me nuts, so it's just like I've almost, during this lockdown, I've particularly just been loving and falling back in love with my DVD collection.
So good.
Yeah, but there's just so many movies, I just wouldn't even know. It's so hard to know where to even start. But I'm obviously 80s obsessed. Ghostbusters, Dragnet, obviously I'm thinking in Tom Hanks terms now, Joe versus the Volcano. And
that is a great film, Joe versus the Volcano. It's a very overlooked film, I think.
It is very underrated, yeah. I think what got me fully obsessed with film, if I'm honest, was probably Bond. And I'll never ever forget, I don't know how old you are, bro, but I'll never forget like the utter devastation when License to Kill came out. Because when License to Kill, and by the way, I think Timothy Dalton is a very dope Bond. I love Timothy Dalton. I think he was ahead of his time. He was like the prototype for Bourne in many, many ways. And so I'll defend Timothy Dalton all day long. Plus he's from Wales, but he lived around here. And when License to Kill came out, it was the first time I was old enough to be kind of aware of a film being, Bond being released. I'd been working my way through the back catalogue, but this is the first time I was like, right, I know there's a new one. I know it's coming out. And then when we find out it was a 15, I was like, I'm still not over it now. Even when I put License to Kill on now, it still gives me a little buzz that I can actually watch it. How nuts is that? I was absolutely devastated. And then in a beautiful 1-2 punch that I'm still definitely not over, it was in the same year, I can't remember how far apart they were, but they introduced the 12 certificate and released fucking Batman, which I also couldn't see because I think I was about 8 or 9 at this point.
Man.
Batman and License to Kill, like 2 films I would kill to see at the cinema, and I couldn't go and see them. I'll never forget that. And I think somewhere that probably began, I've always been obsessed with Bond. I feel like Bond was the first thing that I could really, like the first film franchise I really wrapped my head around. And, I was like, I would watch any Bond, didn't care. And it became a thing where, like, if I did, I can't remember how my mum, it was just perfect for her to use as bribery because there were so many different Bond videos, right? And so every month or so, she took me to the shop and I got to buy a new Bond movie, and it took me an hour to choose between all the different ones. And my gran educated me on who the different Bonds were, and my gran knew loads about Bonds. So the whole thing was like, I think, so I'd say Bond solidified it for me in terms of like, films that I just go back to and still go back to today. I watched Spy Who Loved Me last week. Never get bored of watching the Bond.
I love it. That's a very similar parallel to what I had. I love the fact that you got into Bond, let's say late in the day, and you had this whole back catalogue to just dive into every week. And I've had similar things with music. I get into a band, like you always wanted to get into a band early, but sometimes you find a classic band who's got this back catalogue of like 10 albums, and it's like, holy shit, I can buy a brand new album every week. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, this is like so much fun being a nerd, I suppose, for want of a better term. It's like anything, having such a passion for this sort of creative stuff is great. I mean, I always say that I love loving movies. I love the fact that I love movies. Ultimately, it's cheap escapism. That's why I've got no problem. I mean, I love watching a really smart, thought-provoking art house movie, and I love a big, dumb blockbuster. And I don't think there's anything, I think there's complete validity in both. I mean, especially in a time like this. I mean, how many times have people during this period put like an album on and it's given them so much comfort, or put a movie on and just lost themselves in a big Star Wars movie or something and just forgot about all the bullshit going on for a couple of hours. It's like people who love movies and music are so lucky. It's such an accessible and relatively cheap thing to love that brings so much pleasure and joy,
Definitely. You've mentioned briefly there that you started out going down the acting route. Was being part of the movie industry as a career always something that, let's say, you thought was achievable? Were there many opportunities open for you to do that, or did you have to kind of dig around and find avenues yourself?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, there's no opportunities whatsoever. I always wanted to be an actor. I grew up wanting to be an actor. I was quite sporty as a kid. But my mum was taught theatre. So I was a very passionate actor, got really involved in drama at school. I was lucky because actually I couldn't do school until year 10 when I was, I couldn't do drama in school until year 10 because I was, it didn't exist. They literally brought it into my school when I hit 14, 15 years old. And I always thought, I was just, wasn't really, I thought whether or not it was feasible. That was just what I was going to do. And I remember going into the career advisor and saying, I want to be an actor. And she didn't even have it on the list.
That's what made me say, like, was you seeing it feasible? Because I could imagine you going into like, what do you want to do when you grow up?
I mean, she was like trying to convince her. You ever thought about, I don't know what she was trying to, whatever she was, but I was like, yeah, thanks. But, none of this, I'm going to go and be an actor. I turned down, I got offered a couple of unconditionals at some really, really great uni courses. But for whatever reason, I just didn't feel like it. I kind of had enough of education or the regimentation of education, or at least my idea of it at about 18, 19 years old. So I did sixth form and then left. And then long story short, I got a gig working as a runner for a TV show called TFI Friday, Chris Evans hosted. And that was amazing because I got to see like some of the best bands in the world rehearse. You get these performances. It was all live, genuinely live. And, we got to see with 10 other people watch these rehearsals. But my first ever job in entertainment was like, there's this huge bin and it was full of ice and full of bottles of beer. And it was on the Thames where the studio was that TFI was shot in. And I had to pull the bottles of beer out the bin and pull the label off the beer. And the ice was designed to make the labels easier to peel off. And so everyone there was like a bar section in TFI. And so everyone drinking a beer in the bar section wasn't advertising the beer because I peeled the label off. It was the glam, it was the glamour that attracted me to it. I felt like I could smash my hands off because I was so cold when I finished that job.
TFI Friday for me was that like condenses the 90s into just one.
Yeah.
Music wise, definitely. It was so good, man. That was an essential on a Friday night before you went out.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Chris Evans at the time. But that was loads of fun. And then the last ever season of TFI, Chris actually left. And then we would get a different guest host. So we would have like Elton John, Spice Girls. It was like big night. It was crazy. It was a lot of fun, and an amazing experience. And then I came back to Derby, got into the kind of promotional business, trying to promote nightclub nights. And I did a bit of DJing and I started working the doors. I was doing security on the doors. And then I sort of worked my way up to managing a nightclub. And that sort of finished in a bit of a hit an unexpected wall. And then it was like, well, I'm going to have a jump at this acting. I was like, at this point, I was like, I can't remember, 23, 24, and it was like, I need to have a go. So I spoke to a friend of mine who I went to school with, who was dating my brother, a girl called Poppy Lloyd, who is now the mother of my nephews and still was my brother. And, but her dad was a guy who was a very, very famous guy, Kevin Lloyd. He was Tosh in The Bill, the TV show The Bill, which was huge at the time. And Poppy very kindly introduced me to an agent who I had to audition for and who took me on. And so I started going for adverts, mainly auditions. The problem was that, twofold the problem was. Firstly, I was more theatre trained, and theatre acting and film acting, it's like comparing swimming and rowing. They're both on water, but they're two very different disciplines, and you need to understand the nuances of both those disciplines. So at first I was giving a theatrical performance for the camera, which just looks far too over the top. But I had to figure that out quite quickly because, of course, I hadn't had any training, so I'd skipped the bloody uni course. And the other problem was I was so fat at the time. I mean, I'm still a fat dude now. Weight is something I've battled my whole life. But at the time, I was really, really fat. And so the roles that I was, everything I was going up for was just it was either a role that really didn't interest me at all. I mean, I would go and do it, but it didn't really excite me, the idea of even getting it. Because it was a comedy and you were making a fool of yourself or stuff like that. As you can imagine, what they tend to cast fat people in. Or I'd go for a role where they'd ask for somebody that was tubby and I'd wander in, and they don't mean me, they mean someone tubby. They don't mean a cute, big, fat bloke. So I'd be sat there with a load of people half my size and think, well, literally I've come all the way to London for this, or I'm just wasting my time. But the first gig I got was for the UK version of Pimp My Ride. And that was the first ever time I got paid to act. But long story short, I mean, I quickly realized that if I was going to get anywhere, then I feel I wanted to sort of try and create my own project, create my own momentum. I was used to dealing with quite big budgets because the nightclub was quite successful for a time there. So I just started trying to raise money for my own project, and I did this classic thing where I wrote a script. It was actually a sort of half true story about me meeting my ex-girlfriend, who I'm still mates with now. Great girl, but she was beautiful and I was a big fat bloke. And it was quite funny how we met and quite funny how I'd won her over. And so I'd sort of wrote a story that was inspired by that. And I called it Urban Romeo. And it was this really kind of ridiculous script about a fat guy meeting a beautiful girl. And it was a perfect role. I figure if I'm never going to get a good role, I need to either go on a diet or write a good role, right? So, and at the time, writing the role seemed easier. So I started shopping this around, this script. I say shopping it around. I started trying to, any sort of little tiny contact I could think of. I mean, I had no idea. It was before the internet was any use, And the couple of people I managed to put it in the hands of who read it sort of said, look, this is great, but your budget's too small. You need more money. Make a bigger budget. And eventually, long story short, I had this 36-page detailed budget and it was like 4.2 million or something utterly ridiculous. And obviously I never got anywhere with it. But what the process of putting that budget together was great, because what it did was it taught me how things were broken down and costed in films, or at least it gave me an idea of it, a clue of it. I'd read a few books about it, but that the hands-on experience was great. And also I'd met a few people who were working in the business in the process of putting that together. And then through a really sort of strange thing, I suppose, to happen is that Empire magazine, on their website, I used to love Empire magazine, still do. And on their website, they were doing like a Q&A with Danny Boyle. I think he was promoting, I think it was Sunshine. And you were allowed to sort of type in your questions for him, right? So I typed in this question. I said, written this script, it keeps getting well received. Everybody seems to really enjoy it, but everybody keeps telling me to keep raising the money and raising the budget and raising the budget and raising the budget. And I feel like it's getting out of control. I have no idea what to do. And he just wrote back, lower your costs, full stop, lower your costs. And I was like, okay. So then what I did is I started writing a contained horror movie. So I figured I'm going to write a cheap movie that I feel like I can do. So it's kind of like, almost like a play, right? Because I've got experience in theatre. I feel like I can raise a tiny bit of money. And so, and about halfway through writing this script, I realised that I was writing it not on purpose at first, but I'd written the script in, so it took place in real time. And then I started thinking, okay, well, and I did a bit of research, and as far as I could tell, there'd never been a horror movie that had been done in one continuous single take. I don't mean 1917. I mean, not hidden cuts. I mean, really in one single continuous take. And so I finished the script and showed it to a few friends that I'd made in the process of doing the budget for the other movie. And most of them just said, you're crazy. You absolutely cannot do that. And of course, you tell me that, and I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. So we pulled it off, and then, we thought, right, we're going to jump in with 2 feet and have a go at it. Through randomly, I'd managed to get in touch with Zach Galligan, who plays Billy in the Gremlins movies. I'd sort of found a blog he was doing online, and through that blog, I'd reached out to him and just got chatting to him. And I'd sent him, and I'd said I was trying to develop a script, and he said, well, if you ever write anything, send it me over. So I sent him the movie was called Cut, and I sent him over and he said, you know what, I'm up for this. If you want to do it, you can fly me over. Let's go for it. And so I managed to sort of beg, borrow and steal and, I managed to just raise somehow like a few quid. I think we made it for about, 12, 13 grand, something like that I managed to raise, and we just made it for nothing. But because we were making it for one, trying to go for this single continuous take, it excited everybody. Everyone was like, God, let's jump in, And I'd said, look, I'm not getting paid by this. I'm not, just so I'm not taking, this is just something that you want to get involved and have a go at. Let's do it together and let's see, see if we can create something that, something a bit special. And we pulled it off. We managed it. We did it. And because of, I don't think it's a very good film per se, but because of the concept of it and the fact that we really did do it in real time, the interest in it, we managed to sell it in America, managed to sell it in the UK. And that kind of got you off that first hump. You were kind of up and running and you could go into HMV and physically pick up the DVD and buy it. And that has a worth, that you're part of the gang then. You've made a film, you're kind of in the club, if you like.
And it's always going to have that level of the first ever single shot horror film.
I mean, it's such a small movie. It's so off the radar, but it is true. As far as I'm aware, we were the first in the world to do it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. In fact, somebody contacted me recently. He was writing a book, like a horror book, and he was asking me about it. And it does have like the proper horror, the guys who really go mine into the detail. It's kind of known, I guess, but not really. It's off the radar.
Doesn't Paul Miro have a song on the... Did he contribute a song?
He does, yeah, absolutely. A brilliant song. I think Paul has 2 songs, actually. Yeah, because Paul and I, before that, were writing together. We were doing we wrote a couple of films. In fact, the Urban Romeo script, we actually developed that into, we called it 10-Year Itch. And I tried to make that after I'd made Cut. And Paul and I joined forces to write 10-Year Itch together. Paul's sense of humour is absolutely hilarious. Brilliant musician. Yeah, he wrote 2 cracking songs that were on Cut. Yeah.
Is a good dude. So you've probably answered one of my questions, or at least touched on it. The role of a movie producer is considerably different to that of a music producer. Does the role vary from project to project? If you could give us an overview of what's involved, because even myself as a film fan, it's always seemed something of a grey area to understand. But I'm thinking that's perhaps because it's such a varied role. I always like juggling plates.
Oh, God. I mean, well, I guess I'm a little bit of a jack of all, master of none, truth be told. I love writing, I love directing. I don't particularly love producing, but the producing facilitates the rest of the creativity. I love producing when I get to produce, like being a co-producer on Jay and Silent Bob Reboot was just an absolute dream come true because I'm such a huge fan. It was worth every second of it. I loved it. But yeah, no, the producer role, I mean, it's almost, I think it would genuinely, I'm not even saying, I think it would genuinely be boring for me to get into too much detail on it. To try and give you an overview is that generally speaking, and this is absolutely not always the case, but generally speaking, the executive producer is someone who brings the money. And the producer is someone who is hands-on, kind of overseeing the hiring of all the talent, oversees everything, right? Oversees the schedule, so it's basically the boss of the set in many ways. The book stops at them. Ultimately, on the business side, obviously the boss of the set on the creative side is the director. And then a line producer, which is underneath the producer. A line producer is the person who minds into the very specifics of the budget. They will run, they will understand what's being spent, where it's being spent, if you're going over, keeping an eye on your expenditure throughout the whole thing. The line producer is utterly key, very, very important. And so that's kind of, so basically the producer's job is, and obviously in a way, the higher the budget, the more responsibility in the sense that I guess the pressure's really on the producer. But the lower the budget, the wider the job description of a producer becomes. You can be booking an actor with an agent and then making the sandwiches. You know what I mean? It's it really, really varies. It's a bloody tough job, and it's generally quite a thankless task because you tend to just get shit off everybody. Are
you kind of like basically handling all the organisation so people like the director and the actors can just focus on their skills? So you're someone who just gets shit done.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're the producer has to say no, though, right? It's like the producer will say, look, we can't afford. You'll read a review of an indie movie, and the review, it'll go, well, that explosion wasn't big enough, it didn't look real. It's like, and then there's a director, you go, no fucking shit, we know it didn't, that's the biggest explosion we could afford, or that fight scene was too short. It's like, yeah, no shit, we had an afternoon to shoot it because the schedule wouldn't allow us to pay for any longer. Don't get me wrong, I get it. I mean, it's, if you put something out there to be reviewed, then you're fair game. But it's frustrating as a filmmaker. I mean, even, I'll tell you what I find actually probably the most frustrating of all is music. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've worked with some unbelievably talented musicians who've given my movies some amazing scores. But there are times when, you just desperately want a song that people know, because if people know that song, it already resonates a kind of emotional response. And there's songs that you'll put in, they're called guide tracks, right? You've always got to be very careful when you're in the edit process, because you're so tempted to put your favorite songs over the certain scenes. But if you do that, right, you're fucked, because you'll never be able to afford that song, not in a million years. One of my favorite songs in the world, probably my favorite song, is Son of a Preacher Man. And I so often use it, and I've stopped myself recently because it just breaks my heart whenever we have to replace it. The poor person you bring in to do the scores, trying desperately. I mean, I use a lot of Hans Zimmer. I mean, I think Hans Zimmer is just walks on water. I just think I'm just a giant fan. And every time I sort of give the guide track into, send a cut of the film with the guide track all over it, and the poor person left doing the scores well, you've fucking scored the film with Hans Zimmer. You put Nancy Sinatra, you put God knows what other, top level artists, and now you want me to just recreate it. Okay, great. You know what I mean? So I guess going back to your question, the producer is the person who, I mean, it's on your shoulders ultimately. You've got to make sure you deliver that movie on time, on budget, and it can be a real bitch of a job. I don't find it anything like as rewarding, generally speaking, as when I'm directing. Yeah, I mean, I really, you could write book. Well, has been books written on how to produce, so it's a very difficult one to kind of summarize without, hopefully I haven't bored everyone to tears with just that explanation,
No, I get it for sure, man. So how does the movie fan in you handle working with legendary pop culture icons? Your CV for working with people who I grew up watching is outstanding. I mean, nothing gets much bigger than Zach Galligan, who you mentioned earlier, and Mark Hamill, at least from an 80s viewpoint. How was it working with all these people, and any particularly extra special moments?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's I'm always starstruck by people I grew up watching, right? If you're in a movie that's close to my heart, I am so excited to meet you, chat to you. And I've been really lucky, to be honest, because I've heard just some unbelievable stories. I mean, Zach from Gremlins. I mean, we've literally took Gremlins on tour around the UK, and after every screening, we do a Q&A. Did it with Adam Marsh, who at the Quad, and the three of us went around Britain. And it was almost each night Zach would tell another story. I've known Zach over 10 years, and he still tells stories that I've never heard that are absolutely gripping and utterly fascinating. He really needs to write a book. I've been saying that to him for years. So I never get tired of hearing stories. I mean, and there's absolute pinch yourself moments. I remember sitting in the bar in LA with Judd Nelson after he'd shot his scene in Madness, and we were sitting having a beer, and he was telling me about being on the Breakfast Club set, and you're just like, this is just absolute, so privileged to get to experience this, right? Yeah, so that never gets old for me. I'll never not be starstruck. I'll never not be impressed. I love being around that level of talent, and I love being around people who've got those kind of stories and that have had such an influence on my life. It's I don't care about fame per se. I couldn't give a shit about whether or not you're famous, but if you've done something I love, then I want to hear about it. If you're creatively passionate, then I want to talk to you about it, even if it's not something I'm necessarily interested in. But creatively passionate people, I'm always drawn to. In terms of stories, I mean, I feel like I've told this story. I've literally told this story twice in the last 3 weeks. I did another couple of podcasts, but it's such a worthy story. It's such a dope story. But if you've ever heard me bang on before, then you've probably heard it already. When we had Mark Hamill over, we actually shot in Leicester, and I guess your listeners are principally English, so they're going to know that Leicester's like little town in the in the middle of England. That it's really just it's not where you would ever expect to see Mark Hamill. And they've got like a little space museum there, quite cool. And we were shooting a movie called Airborne, and we needed something to double for a air traffic control. And obviously most airports are using them, and they're very sensitive about whether they let you near them, even if they're not using them. So I had the idea that maybe we could go and have a look at the space museum, see if the sort of NASA control or whatever it is they've recreated there could double. And so we went in and checked it out, and it worked perfectly. So we said to them, we were like, look, we're bringing someone up. We can't say who it is, but believe me, I think it'll work quite well. So you can take some pictures and so Mark's request was that we don't let the press know he's here. He said he'll do press and support the movie afterwards, but before he does the movie, he wants to be able to concentrate on the film. And if we let the press know, then obviously he does tend to attract quite a lot of fans. And he genuinely does. It's not, lovely, humble guy, Mark. It was just a very polite request. So on the last day of shooting, we've been shooting in Leicester for a few days. And on the last day of shooting, we brought in some select press. I think Empire was there. I think Hey You Guys, and just some press to do some interviews for the film. And it was the last night. We'd finished filming. Mark had been unbelievable, such a nice guy, and so patient. And we'd gone way over, and Mark had been down and really, he'd been up for it and really cared about the film. It wasn't just there. He wasn't just there phoning it in. And a bloody good actor, which is a surprise to no one, of course. So we were doing these interviews in his trailer, and during one of the interviews, I opened his trailer door and peeked outside. And as I opened the door, there's like a stormtrooper walk past. I fucking shut the door and I was like, fuck it. I was thinking we've blown it, It's like, one of the crews told somebody, or, and I opened the door again, and no shit, I can never remember which characters it was, but there was like a Chewie that walked past, or a Princess Leia. I do remember a Princess Leia. And there was basically Star Wars characters walking past the fucking trailer. And I just thought, oh no, I hope we're not going to piss Mark off now, right at the end, right? And also bear in mind that we've shot long days. We've got to drive him back to London to jump straight on a flight back to LA, which is a brutal flight. So he's tired, and he's like, if there's, God knows how many Star Wars fans outside, it's, it's not fair that he has to, he's going to be too tired to meet all these people. And so I nip out the trailer. The first thing that struck me, though, was that this is a Saturday night in the middle of Leicester. If you'd heard that Mark Hamill was on a film set and then you dressed up as a Star Wars character and gone to that film set, first thing you would do is go and stand outside what looked like a film trailer. And yet everybody was just walking past, literally paying no mind whatsoever to the trailer. They were just walking past. So I followed the kind of, the flow of people. There's quite a few people. And we also had an actor in the movie called Billy Murray, quite a well-known English actor. He used to be in The Bill. He's a really nice guy as well, actually. And as I followed this flow of people, they were all going into this room, which turned out to be like a function room, like a space you could hire. And there was a dude on the door filming people as they went in. And the dude on the door had recognized Billy. And he'd approached Billy and said, would you mind doing us a video message? And Billy said, yeah, sure. What's it for? And the guy explained to Billy that what was happening was a 50th birthday party that was fancy fucking dress, right, with a sci-fi theme. 70% of people there dressed as Star Wars. And the cherry on the cake was that the guy was celebrating not just his 50th, but he was celebrating being 5 years clear of cancer. And so, so Billy came up to me and said, that dude over there has got having a sci-fi birthday party. Everyone's dressed as Star Wars characters. I've just done him a video message. Can you imagine how much his mind would be blown if we can take that dude into Mark's trailer and Mark would do a video message for him? I mean, like, their last place on the face of the earth, and you're going to the Space Museum on a Saturday night in Leicester, you'd expect Mark Hamill to be sitting in there. I mean, you just wouldn't, in a million years, you wouldn't have thought it. So I ran back over to the trailer and went in and said to Mark, I said, explain the situation to Mark and said, look, do you mind if we bring the video guy in the trailer so you could do him a video message? And Mark says, no, let's not do that. And for that second there, my shoulder sort of slumped. I was like, and Mark just turns around and goes, let's go in. Oh God! And every time I tell this story, it never gets old because the hairs always go on the back of my neck and on my arms. It was just a moment that I was like, okay, brain, take in all the details of this because this is going to be something you're going to remember until you drop dead or go nuts. So we jumped in the car and we drove Mark around the corner, and they had this sort of makeshift red carpet thing with like a little velvet rope, leading up to the entrance. I'll never forget it. And we'd sent someone inside to say, look, would the birthday guy, would he mind coming out to the entrance for us? We've got a little surprise for him. We're shooting a film next door. And the guy was a bit pissed off because it was like his 50th birthday, right? And we're some dickhead film crew next door were like interrupting him. And so he was kind of stood at the door like, what? And then this car pulls up, Mark Hamill gets out, and this dude, honestly, he just went white. The colour just went straight out. I thought you could knock him over with a feather. I was a bit half concerned he was going to collapse because it just the shock of it. And so Mark, of course, walks down the red carpet and they're filming it and they're taking pictures. And Mark's so wonderful with this guy. He's chatting to him. He's making jokes. The guy can barely, the guy sort of trying to spit God knows what out. But then, of course, by this point, word's out that Mark Hamill's on the red carpet, and so you've got stormtroopers coming out, and you got, and anyway, long story short, Mark, I don't know how long Mark stood there for, but it was a good while, half hour plus, 45 minutes, doing pictures and saying hello to anyone who wanted a picture, or wanted something signed, or anything they wanted. Mark did. He did, stood there until everyone who wanted it, wanted to meet him, got the opportunity. And then he was late. He had to get straight in the car, drive down to London, catch a flight. And I think in times like this, the reason I love telling that story generally, but it's I think there's so much negativity floating around at the moment and so much shit, and a lot of it is important, very, very important. But amidst all that crap, it is lovely to be able to tell such an awesome story about someone who is not only an incredibly talented actor, but also someone who's so lovely and beautiful that they deserve every little tiny bit of success he's ever had. Mark, he's such a wonderful guy.
I love stories like that. It just warms your heart, really. And the fact that you're getting so excited about telling it, imagine those, I don't know, 50 to 100 guests at that party. They'll be telling it everybody for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I'll probably end up meeting one of them at some point. Or it'll probably have got out of that, like, you can imagine like the Chinese whispers. He probably came in and did a backflip and, fired up his lightsaber by the time the story that's floating around. Such a good dude, the best.
I was wondering, how did your initial contact with Jason Mewes happen? I know you obviously worked on the movie Devil's Tower together, but what kicked that whole journey off?
Yeah, so what it was that Adam Marsh, who is I've mentioned him a couple of times in this interview, he's the film programmer at the Quad. And the first movie I was just talking about, Cut, the horror, we premiered it at the Quad. And that's how I met Adam. And Adam and I, you know what it's like when you meet fellow film fans and fellow passionate creative people, you tend to get on. And so Adam and I got on really well. Long story short, I had one of those rare opportunities where I had a company that was interested in investing into movies. And Adam had written this script that I thought sounded brilliant. So I thought, 2 and 2 together, I thought it was a nice little opportunity here. So that was the first film that I produced without directing. And so when we were talking about who to hire, and obviously we had a very small budget, but we had a few quid to put into an actor, I suggested Jason Mewes because I was a massive fan of Jason Mewes, to be honest with you. And so that was how it happened, really. I mean, Owen, who was the director, a guy called Owen Tooth, lovely guy. We're actually working on a project together at the moment. And he loved the idea of Jay. So we sent the script over, pitched him the role. I can't remember whether Owen spoke to him or not before he came over. I forget. And Jay, and that's how I initially met Jay, yeah.
How was it bringing him to Derby for the first time?
No, it was amazing. I mean, I brought Mark Hamill to Derby. I brought Van Damme to Derby. I brought Jason Mewes to Derby. I brought Vinnie Jones from LA to Derby, which really was pissed at me about. But I love it. I love bringing people over to Derby. But yeah, it was amazing. And while he was shooting the film, he's such a lovely dude, Jay. He's the best. While he was shooting the film, I just got a sense that it's unfair to say he was bored. I wouldn't say he was bored, but he was unchallenged. The role was something he knew so well he could just do in the back. I mean, he was great. He was brilliant. But you could see he just wasn't challenged by it, right? And I remember we got on pretty well, Jay and I. And we went out for a coffee, and I said to him, what is there anything out there that would really excite you? What would challenge you? What would really, really, get under your skin and motivate you? He said, "You'll laugh." I said, "I promise I won't. What do you fancy doing?" He said, "I really want to play a serial killer." I said, "Right, I'm going to write something and I'm going to send it you." And he was like, "Yeah, all right, sure." Kind of pat me on the head. Yeah, how many times have you heard that? And I did. And I put together, came up with an idea, put together a script, sent it over. He really responded to it. But it was in the View Askew universe, right? He was kind of playing himself, and Kevin was in it, and it was an alternate universe. And so I'd actually pitched the idea to him before I'd written the script, because I didn't want to sort of tread on his and Kevin's toes until I had permission to do so. And he was like, "Yeah, fuck it, that sounds great. Let's go for it." So then he came over for a Comic-Con, a London Comic-Con, and we sort of spent, I hung out with him at the Comic-Con, and I need no persuasion to go to a Comic-Con. I love that stuff. So we hung out there and we sort of worked on the script and some ideas while we were doing it. And there's another guy with us, Chris, as well. He was there working on it with us. And then so Jay gave a bunch of notes. And then I can't forget the timeline now, but I did the World War II movie either just before that, or for long story short, we paused the film for a bit and I went off and did a World War II movie, and Jay's always very busy. And then when I came off the back of the World War II movie, I was like, I really want to make this Jason Mewes movie. And then by that point, Jay had said, "Do you know what? I've directed a short film, I've directed a music video, kind of getting the taste for directing." And I was like, well, if Jason Mewes' feature film, that's a selling point, right? That's a great idea. Plus it's his story, really. I mean, like it makes sense. As much as I wanted to direct it, it made a lot of sense for Jay to do it. And also Jay and I got on really well and were creatively on the same page. So, I knew that it would be a collaborative process between us as well. And that was how it was born. That's how Madness in the Method started, really. I mean, and the next thing you know, we're shooting the bloody thing in Derby and in LA. We shot part in LA and then we came to Derby and doubled Derby in January for Hollywood.
I love watching the film and trying to pick out out.
Yeah, I mean,
parts.
you can do it.
Is that one? Is that one? Is that one? Maybe.
I mean, it's audacious. It's audacious. As far as I'm aware, it's the first time Derby's doubled for Hollywood. Certainly in January, I'd say. I'll never forget ever. We were outside the council house in Derby, centre of Derby, and we had about 150 extras, I think. And I remember saying to everyone, like I was on a megaphone thing, and I was like, okay, everybody, this is literally January. You could see your own breath. It was freezing. And I was like, right, coats off, jumpers off, hats off, guys. We're in LA. We love it, you know. I mean, I've never pissed off so many people all at once in my life. But they were such troopers. It was great. I mean, everyone got into it and got into the crazy idea of it. I love nothing more than, well, there are a few things I love more, but I love very few things more than bringing movies back to Derby, you know.
It's so good. For anyone who's from Derby, there's no denying the scene of the underpass where the cars go. That's definitely Derby, because pretty much every band from Derby has had a photo shoot in that underpass because it looks all dark and eerie.
Well, it was more to do with the fact that we knew that Jay, like in the script, Jay broke down in the Hollywood Hills, but we were like, I can't remember what it was. It's to do with the show. I think it was Vinny's schedule, because originally Danny Trejo was supposed to play that part. Danny Trejo's in the film, but him and Jay are big mates in real life. Originally, Danny was going to play that part, but that clashed schedule-wise, so we rewrote it for Vinny. But I think schedule-wise, Vinny could only fit into the UK portion of the shoot, so we had to figure out a way of how the fuck can we double Derby for the Hollywood Hills? That's too far. I was like, hang on, why don't we just stick him in a fucking tunnel? You know, the tunnel's the same in the UK as it is in the US. We stuck a US speed sign on the wall, you know, and then boom, off we go. We're in Hollywood.
Love it. When did you get the call to be producer on Jay and Silent Bob, and who was the person who picked you up off the floor?
So it's Jordan, Jay's wife, her and Jordan Monsanto, or Jordan Muse, and an unbelievably good producer called Liz Destro. And Jordan and Liz, who were the lead producers on that movie, and they're fucking so brilliant. The pair of them are incredible. And I learned shitloads from them. But Jordan approached me and asked if I'd be interested in coming on board and looking at potential ways of coming on board. And obviously, yeah, it was an absolute pick me up off the floor moment, you know. And also such a wonderful compliment, because it meant she was happy with the way Jay and I were working together. I mean, I think I broke, you know, the speed of light in terms of how quickly I said yes. You know, of course, I mean, what are you going to do? Of course. I mean, that's an amazing privilege. And I got to work with the guy who plays Detective Arnold in Madness and the Methods, a guy called Mickey Gooch, who's just a fucking unbelievably awesome dude. So much fun, so charismatic. He came on board with that, with Jay and Bob as well. And Kevin cast Mickey in the movie as well, which is really cool. I believe on the back of Kevin seeing Mickey in Madness, he then cast him in Jay and Bob. So yeah, so we all went over to New Orleans, and you know, that was just the kind of experience that you know money can't buy. It was just pinch yourself. And because Jay and I had such a close working relationship on Madness, when I got there, we just sort of fell into the same groove. And so we would start rehearsing his lines. And of course, you know, it was so much fun. Like, you know, you're standing on a Jay and Bob set, and you're running the lines with Jay, you know, and I'm playing the different characters. And Kevin's writing so fucking funny. And Jay's like, Jay doesn't care. He's not, there's no, when I say he doesn't care, what I mean is like, he doesn't, you don't need to treat him like royalty. He doesn't need like, you know, he'll just go and have a burger around the corner, and we'll be stood outside the shop running lines, you know, and then people walking past like double taking, going, holy fuck, is that Jason fucking Mewes? He doesn't care. You know, he's not, he doesn't think he's anything special. You know, he's just, you know, just chill. He's super relaxed. We had this, he loved these meatball sandwiches in this place in New Orleans, and we used to stand in the car park every night after the shoot, or most nights after the shoot, going through the lines for the next day over and over and over. And you'd have people watching out the window, and, you know, he's just so relaxed like that. Because me and Jay were going over it and over it and over it and over it. By about day 2 or 3, because we were on a very tight schedule on Jay and Bob. And I can tell this story because Kev's already told it on a podcast, so I know he doesn't mind it being out there. And so after about day 2 or 3, he kind of wanted to be on the monitor as much as he could. Once he'd sort of set the scene up and had everybody performing and standing where he needed them or wanted them to be. And Kevin's super collaborative anyway. So, you know, they go through the blocking and the rehearsing of the scene. And then when they're ready to shoot it, because I'd A, watched the scene, and B, rehearsed it all with Jay, like on day, I think it was day 2 or 3, Kevin's like, called me over and he's like, would you mind being in the scene? I was like, what, you fucking what? And he's like, would you, hang on, just put the coat. And he puts the Silent Bob coat on and the Silent Bob cap on, right? And before I fucking know it, I'm in the scene playing Kev, like, so he can watch the scene on the monitor. And that was just, forget it. I mean, that's just like, you know, moments like that where all the bullshit of this business make it worth it, right? And obviously I'm trying to play it cool and I'm trying to be, but inside my heart, and Jay knows as well, because he knows how much of a fan I am. So Jay's getting a kick out of how much he knows that I'm loving it and trying to play cool. he fully knows that I'm not being cool. And the first scene I did was like a courthouse scene with Justin Long. And Justin Long is such an improver. He's so fucking funny. He just fires like a million different lines unscripted at you. And it's called corpsing, right? In acting, if you laugh during a scene, it's called corpsing. And I've been Silent Bob for a minute, and I'm literally having to pinch myself from dying laughing because fucking Justin Long is being so funny. I mean, he was cracking me up. And but obviously I'm having to, because I can't. If my reign as Silent Bob would last very, very short if I screwed up a scene by laughing through it, and you got Craig Robinson who's playing the judge and he's chuckling away through that. It was just madness, and so I got to be Kevin's stand-in throughout loads of the movie from now on in, really. And Kev called me in whenever he wanted. I loved it.
Almost like putting on like a superhero costume when he put the jacket on.
I mean, yeah. I feel like I've peaked, But again, a bit like Mark Hamill in the sense that, Kevin is, and Jay, they're just an awesome, lovely, down to earth, real people. It's not like the camera turns off and Jay and Kevin turn into a couple of, dickheads. That couldn't be further from the truth. They're so lovely. All their families are as well. Jordan's wonderful. Jay has a magnificent little beautiful daughter. And obviously Kevin's daughter Harley's becoming a real actress in her own right now. She's incredibly talented. I mean, the whole kind of View Askew world, everybody. I mean, it's just a wonderful, warm, amazingly talented, creatively passionate group of people. It's just, it's amazing.
A definite family atmosphere on the whole.
Yeah,
set.
Big time.
I get the impression that Kevin strives to do that, and it helps with the creativity and just the overall vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Brian O'Halloran, who's Dante and Clark's, he's equally wonderful. I mean, Brian, I remember I was in New York not long after the Jay and Bob shoot, and Brian straight away comes in from New Jersey, shows me around everywhere. It's like, I kind of believe that good people attract good people generally. I couldn't tell you a bad apple. Everybody brings something to the table. They're all wonderful, warm people, and just a lot of talent as well,
They say there's like a 30-year cycle of when things come back into fashion, and we've had something of an 80s revival over the past 10 years or so, and now elements of the 90s seem to be creeping in. So someone who grew up, I think you became a teenager in the 90s. Is there anything you'd like to see make a comeback, or anything that should definitely be firmly left there?
It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because I'm utterly and totally obsessed with 80s movies. It drives some of my friends nuts. Because if it's made in the 80s, I love it. Even the font that they use, at the front of most 80s movies, I love. But there is a real distinct difference between movies that I absolutely adore and think shouldn't be touched. Not necessarily because they're sacred. I mean, nothing's sacred, is it, in the film business? But just because I just don't see what you're going to gain from, redoing it. I just don't see where the benefit is, other than pure financial. And maybe that's not a bad reason to do it, but it doesn't really work, does it? I mean, if you look at the Point Break, Footloose, I mean, the amount of remakes they've made, most of them don't work. Whereas what's nice now, what excites me loads more, is actually continuing the story. So, for example, the new Ghostbusters coming out, the idea that that's, mainly a brand new cast. The trailer I thought looked absolutely incredible. It looks like he's got the tone perfectly. And I'm so much more excited by continuation of the story than I was from the reboot with the girls. And I thought, by the way, the girls in that movie were great. I didn't think, I really thought they were brilliant. And I would be totally interested if the girls were in this movie, if it was a sequel. It's just the reboot element that I don't get on with. I would love to see a Gremlins 3. With some of the old characters and a bunch of new ones coming through. That would be so exciting, And I think that it works from a commercial point of view as well, because you're kind of keeping the old miserable fans like me happy by bringing back the people I grew up loving and watching, and I'm going to go. But equally, you're going to bring in some new fans, because you're going to bring in young actors that are going to attract in new fans as well. So it kind of works on two levels, as Bill and Ted are demonstrating, And obviously, we had amazing success with Kevin's model of releasing Jay and Bob. It definitely works, But equally, I'm a realist, and I understand the reason why they're making sequels now is because the remakes just don't work. They've tried and tried and tried. And it seems to me that they're not working. So now they're trying the continuation of stories, and that seems to work. And that really excites me so much more than any kind of remake. With that said, again, just before I think we started recording, we were talking about that movie, The Last Starfighter. And The Last Starfighter for me is that's the type of movie that you could remake, right? Because the concept's so genius. You know, the idea that for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't know. And if you haven't seen it, track it down. The Last Starfighter is really worth it. And it's basically there's an intergalactic war going on. And what they've done is they've placed these arcade machines on different planets across the universe in an attempt to recruit fighter pilots. So if anyone hits a certain score on this arcade machine, then they come down and they want to recruit you. You know, you could be the chosen one to help defend the galaxy. And of course, you know, our lead character does just that. And before he knows it, he's being transported from his trailer park into a Star Wars set. I mean, it's such a cool idea. And as you pointed out earlier, the only thing, you know, the problem with that film is that they just didn't have the technology or the money for some of the effects. But if you took that concept now and, you know, and threw a bit of money at it, I mean, that to me, that's the type of film that I think is absolutely worthy of a remake. And you could see a logic as to why to do it, right? I mean, that makes sense remaking something like that.
It'd really tie in with the old popularity of something like Stranger Things as well.
Oh,
with the
totally.
Old trailer park. If they gave it that kind of vibe as well, you'd have two totally different movies sat within one.
I love Stranger Things. I think it's so good. They just, for me, they keep getting better. Each season just is better than the last.
I think one thing I mentioned about it, I think it was after the second season, really, which really struck out how well it had been made. It was like you could take away the whole supernatural science fiction element of it. You could just do it about the kids and just their interactions. It was that strong. It really was.
100%, yeah. Almost like a Stand By Me or something, yeah. I mean, absolutely. You really could. Yeah, you really could. Same with the first It film as well, which I thought was brilliant. So obviously it had taken, you know, it was almost like a hardcore version of Stranger Things. And when I say the first, I mean the first of the recent two movies. Yeah, I mean, same sort of stuff to be... I don't know. I'm always kind of like, I'm kind of bad, really. I always want like another one. Like I'm totally down for another Indiana Jones. 100%. I really want one, you know, and I know Harrison's getting older and you can totally incorporate that within the role, you know, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it.
To bring things to a close, I always like to ask people who've been on a journey which has a direct connection to things they loved as a kid. What would your teenage self think if you could tell him some of the things you've done and the people you've worked with? Would his mind be blown? Sat in his bedroom in Derby watching VHS tapes, suddenly gets a phone call from Dominic Burns in 2020.
Well, he'd go, "Stop eating, you fat..." Ease up on the booze, for Christ's sake. We wouldn't mind another 40 years, you know. And he'd also say, "Learn to write a script before you make a Van Damme movie." You know, to be honest, like I'm pretty good, I think, at going, okay, well, you fucked that right up. How can you improve? Where did you get that wrong? How can you improve? I think part of me would, in a weird way, think I'd be more successful than I am now because I'm optimistic and an idiot, you know. But on the other side, whether I'd really believe that I'd actually worked with someone like Mark Hamill or, you know, or the, you know, like the opportunities I've had and some of the experience I've had. I mean, I don't think I would believe it. I think I would just think it was just, you know, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. Still haven't cracked it. In no way consider myself having made it. Not even nearly, not even just getting warmed up, you know. I'm still passionate, still just want to tell stories. I don't want to be famous. I don't really want any of that, but I really want to be able to tell stories, you know, for the rest of my life, hopefully. I think I would just say, yeah, don't lose the passion. You know, remember this feeling you get when you're going to the UCI on a Friday night or whatever, you know, but I don't feel like I've forgotten it. You know what I mean? It's like I still get butterflies when I go to the cinema, as crazy as that sounds. I really do. So I guess I'm really lucky. I mean, it's warfare. Believe me, it's warfare, particularly this year. It's been a bloody nightmare. But it's been a nightmare for everyone, right? You know, for creatives who do what I do, the lows are really low, but the highs are just unfathomably high. So it's just that, you know, as long as you can handle the lows, you get the highs, right? You know, but most sane people just prefer a more calmer path, you know, and many times I envy that path, I tell you. But I'm not, believe me, please don't, I'm not moaning. Very, very, very grateful.
Awesome, mate. Well, I shall let you go, but I really appreciate all your time and I've loved hearing the stories. So thank you ever so much. I look forward to seeing you at a movie night at the Quad at some point and maybe grabbing a beer.
Absolutely, Rob. Thanks so much. Always a real pleasure to chat to fellow film fans.
Well, you take it easy. Stay safe.
Same here. Right back to you, bro.
Big shout out and thank you to Dominic Burns for being so open and sharing such amazing stories. Please make sure to check out Madness in the Method, which you can buy or rent now through all the regular streaming sites or find it on Blu-ray and DVD. Thanks to you guys for listening to the Straight to Video podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and please continue to like, share and review wherever you can. Till next time, I've been your host Rob Lane, and as always, you continue to make this thing a whole lot of fun, and I can't wait to speak to you all again real soon.